Hello, Vesperisms listeners. Before we get started, I want to take a minute to invite you to join Vesperisms on Patreon. You can support this podcast with a subscription for as little as $2 a month. You'll get live monthly video chats with me, early access to Vesperisms episodes, full unedited interviews, prints of my illustrations, and even signed copies of my books. I'm looking for more ways to welcome you into what I do and to be part of this together. Many of you have written to tell me that you just needed someone to say out loud what you'd been thinking too, and my heart is to help artists and non-artists alike to foster an unapologetic artistic worldview as a way to think through what's going on around us in a more high-resolution way than the boxes we're constantly being forced into. There's strength in numbers, and it's important that not only do I connect with you, but that Vesperisms listeners can get to know each other. So I want to welcome you to become Vesperisms patrons on Patreon. It also helps me financially to set aside the time from writing and illustrating my books and to create more encouragement and soul food for you. So please go to patreon.com/Vesperisms and sign up today, won't you? I'd love to have you aboard. And now, back to the show. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Vesperisms. I'm your host, author-illustrator Vesper Stamper, and I'm here to help recalibrate your artistic worldview. So grab your coffee and pull up a chair here in my studio, and let's have a chat. This is Season 2, Episode 6, on being Fireborn. So, my darlings, it's been a minute. I apologize for the sizable gap in my episode releases. But I have to tell you, not only have I been crazy busy at work on my new novel, but I have been trying to write a series on censorship, which I will be releasing at long last. But I wanted to be very careful in the crafting of that series. Since we are living in a very censorious season, not just in my country, the United States, but across the globe, I wanted to make sure I was communicating my thoughts effectively and accurately. I believe in choosing my words with great intention and not letting anyone dictate to me what I should think or say unless I have fully thought it through and know that they are my own thoughts. So I think I'm at last ready to release that to you, so look for that very soon. But first I wanted to offer you an adaptation of a talk that I did in March at the Breath in the Clay Arts Conference in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The Breath in the Clay is always the highlight of my year. It's when I can be myself and talk to my home team, as it were. The Breath in the Clay is also the host of the Makers and Mystics podcast, and starting in June, I'm going to be guest hosting over there for a few months. So I want to encourage you to go on over there and drink deep. They have so much to offer. It's a fantastic podcast. My heart here on Vesperisms and in everything I do is to encourage and empower artists and those who love them. I want you to accept yourself as you are, to operate out of a place of deep understanding of who you are and how you're wired, no matter how different that may seem from those around you. So it's in that spirit that I offer you this talk. It's called On Being Fireborn. This old anvil laughs at many hammers. There are men who can't be bought. The fireborn are at home in fire. A friend recently sent me these 3 little lines from Carl Sandburg's poem, The People Yes. And you know when you hear something that sums up your entire being and you wished you'd written about it yourself? Well, that's this. And so I want to talk to you about the artist's true home. In the Bible, the very first allusion to fire is in Genesis chapter 4. This is when Abel brings God a sacrifice of the firstborn of his flock. The memory of Eden is still fresh in his family's memory. The aching loss, the biting shame, his parents' mutual devouring, the children's knowledge of their parents' sin, Cain's resentment toward his brother. And into this, they each bring their offerings. Abel's offering of the firstborn of his flock, it improves with fire, whereas Cain's is utterly consumed. Nothing to show for it but futility and failure, and he spirals into resentment, offense, retribution, his own version of justice for the wicked world he was born into, the lot he was dealt, and to which he always appeals. He forgets that Abel had the same lot, and is struggling back toward the flame himself. Brothers. Tradition says twins. And the result? Cain puts his brother's blood in the ground, and the ground seizes and hardens against his best efforts, like trying to turn a screw the wrong way until it strips, when a caress would have done, a coaxing of the animal onto the altar. Abel's blood was shed, when Cain's proper sacrifice would have been enough. Fire will test each man's work. The next mention of fire is later in the same chapter. Cain's 3 times great-grandson Tubal-Cain is born, the son of another murderer, Lamech. Tubal-Cain becomes the first person to forge sharp things in fire. He's a worker of copper and iron. The Jewish commentator Rabbeinu Bahya connects the story of Tubal-Cain to Jeremiah, where those of us who are not metallurgists can learn that copper and iron cannot be smelted together. Who knew? I've made you a tester of metals among my people, that you may know and test their ways. They are all stubbornly rebellious, going about with slanders. They are copper and iron, all of them act corruptly. The bellows blow fiercely, the lead is consumed by fire. In vain the refining goes on, for the wicked are not removed. Rejected silver they are called, for the Lord has rejected them. This unstable combination of elements results in slag, its unusable metal. Rabbeinu Bahya says, true cooperation between people who practice slander is not more possible than alloying copper and iron. In the end, both metals will become useless. Another anomaly is that you can never separate these 2 metals again. This is the reverse of what we find with alloys containing silver and gold. This demonstrates the totally negative fallout of anything involving slanderous statements. Tubal-Cain's work comes to naught. The very next chapter tells us of the flood, where the fires cooled and the slag fell to the bottom of the world. Think of it this way. There are 2 worlds, iron world and copper world. Iron world is the one we know, the world of the mundane. Copper world is the one beyond, outside, where there be monsters. You, artist, which one do you live in? Do you live in iron world or copper world? The answer is neither. See, between iron world and copper world, there is an encircling fire. We talk about the flame of inspiration, right? Of passion. Well, this is where that flame burns. In the in-between, the margin, the liminal space, the just outside. That space is a crucible. Fire will test metals, and fire will test our metal. Like Tubal-Cain, a tester is an experimenter. An artist. Artists are the fire testers, the experimenters. We exist between iron world and copper world. Prophets live in this space. The wildness of God lives in this space. And if we're honest, we're at home here, and we have a job. Our job is to translate the monsters to the known world and the known world to the monsters. But we're not to live in the monster realm, and we're not to live in the mundane realm. And we're not to mix the 2. Like Rabbeinu Bahya says, iron and copper will cancel each other out. Efforts born of Cain's resentment and bitterness will create useless slag. But we are fireborn. We're not just fire dwellers, but we are fire-born. Artist, fire is your home. The fireborn are at home in fire. We artists have a duty to speak the truth. Now, by that, I don't mean making political art or edgy art or shock art. I said that the artist's duty is to speak the truth. Politics is actually the most low-resolution version of describing reality that man has ever invented. This is why Governor Pontius Pilate could look the Creator in the flesh in the eye and seriously ask him, what is truth? It's because his vision was 8-bit politics. His paradigm had no way to scale up to full-spectrum reality. What then is truth to the artist? Is it to let the institutions define the parameters of reality? To play along with their semantic games and maneuvering of human beings as nothing more than categorical abstractions? What do we even have to do with these pixelated corruptions of human dignity? We are the light of the world that brings light into darkness and clarifies what the world only fumbles and bumbles with in the dark. What happens, though, when the artist crosses over into the realm of monsters? Well, that's where you find addiction, mental anguish, nightmares. When we cross into the monster's realm, we are consumed by fire. But what happens when we try to plant roots in the mundane? Well, that's where we smolder down to embers. We say things like, I used to draw. I used to sing. There used to be a song in me. There used to be a dance in me. Fire will test each man's work. Some of you listening to this have crossed into Iron World. You feel like a smoldering wick or ember. But God means to fan you into flame, because his fire is truth and he is the living flame of love, and he means you to be at home in fire. He's the one with eyes of flame, and if you choose to let him, he's going to be staring into your eyes for 1 billion years, so you should get used to being at home in that fire. He means to pull truth out of you like a flame coaxed by breath. Artist, you belong in the fire of the borderlands. You're at home there. Remember the way you used to come alive before a canvas? It's because you're Fireborn. Remember how you were able to tell the normies about the mischief that the monsters were up to? Fireborn. Maybe little by little you let the people of Iron World cool you down, tell you that you burned too hot. But every now and then a hot breeze crosses your shoulders and you remember. Still others of you listening to this are raging fires, slashing and burning like wildfires on brush, and it's hurting and scarring you and the people around you, and the best response you can muster is, well, I'm self-actualizing, and as for those other people, well, those are just consequences. That's just accountability, you see. If you didn't want to get burned, it's your own fault. You shouldn't have been such dry kindling. Well, which one am I? I'll be honest with you, I'm a rager. I have to channel my fire, and I've been doing it for decades now. I am not the same burn-it-all-down person I was 30 years ago when God pulled me out of Copper World and into the border where I belong. The burning flame of the Word of God has shown me, as a Fireborn, how to give both heat and light, how to illumine, how to warm weary bones. Sometimes that's too hot for people, and that's okay. But the Word of God lets the artist say to those around her, here, come in from the cold and stand next to me and come more fully alive. Now you, artist, born in the fire, at home in fire, here's a note based on something I've seen just too many times. Just because I say that you don't belong in the mundane world doesn't mean leaving your family behind so that you can find yourself and get free from the shackles, that is, people like your parents or your spouse or your children who you think are in the way of your work. Get out of here with that. But neither am I saying that you have to abandon your fellow oddballs and play it safe and stop keeping it weird. Being Fireborn is not situational, it's positional. It's knowing that before God, in the realm of your spirit man, you are a border watcher. You are a seer. Your calling is prophetic, which means that you tell the truth. You stick your foot in closing doors. You keep the flame lit. And whether you've sojourned too long in Iron World or in Copper World, the good news is that you can come home, back to the borderlands, back to the fire, anytime you want. But it requires something of you, artist. You must abandon the illusion that you belong or fit anywhere else. Somewhere over there between the safe cul-de-sac and the dark den of disturbance lies your home, a place to rest your thoughts and your emotions and the work of your hands. It's glorious and bright, and you can give your whole self to it, and it will make you love people better, and it will insulate you against opinion and offense and show you how to make a proper sacrifice. When we go back home to the fire, we can detach ourselves from the delusion that playing by the rules of either Copper World or Iron World will yield the results that we want. Ask yourself, who are the monsters of our moment? Who are the normies? Both want to take you over and pull you into their realm. They want to tell you that your fire is too dangerous or not dangerous enough. Iron World wants to control your words, squeeze you into the conformity of the government, the corporation, the pop culture, the news pundits, the approved viewpoints. Censorship, retributive justice, categorization, collective guilt narratives, flattening of your fellow human into that 8-bit resolution. That's Iron World. Copper World wants to drag you into a spiral of degradation, disintegration, dismantling, deconstructing, until you grieve the hope that you once had, but feel like you're not allowed to have. Both of these worlds want to lure you out of the fire and make you their tool, but not you. You are Fireborn. If you go back home to the fiery borderlands, you don't fall for excuses like, it's not cancellation, it's consequences, or they can't help it, they're just so angry, or I was born a mistake, or their voice doesn't count, or it's not sin if my side does it, or this time this failed philosophy will work, I swear, or if we just get this guy in charge, or the kids are all right, they'll be fine, they're resilient. You won't fall for any of that because the fire is truth and love together in eternal combustion. And both the monsters and the normies need you to bring it. Fire will test each man's work because the fire border is the gateway to the kingdom of God. And if you are an artist who understands his or her calling, then your concerns are kingdom concerns. And you get excited about that. You get fired up about it. And the petty, paltry, pasty, cold ember systems of the world become irrelevant. I can have peace in letting the flames simply burn in me, around me. And from that place I can create. I can be enchanted by what the light reveals. I can translate across worlds. I can be a bridge. I can say what I mean and mean what I say. The Fireborn are at home in fire. So when the fire of censorship or shame or competition or failure comes to your doorstep, you can just say, that won't work on me. Attempts to silence you frizzle and dissolve in your heat and light. You can say, I don't recognize your definition of terms because here in my home, in my studio, in my relationships, we speak fire. I know who I am. I know what kingdom I'm part of. And I know I am positioned here in the in-between on purpose for a purpose. By the time the dissident Czech playwright Václav Havel was sentenced to 4.5 years of hard labor for defending his fellow dissident artists, he had already gone there mentally. He had been carrying around an arrest kit of toothpaste and cigarettes and razors in case he was arrested by surprise. In this way, he was able to move on to making his work, even in prison. The fire had already burned away the fear of the consequences, so he was able to get back to work. The Fireborn are unafraid of having everything burned away. Woe to me, says the prophet Isaiah, I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Go ahead, touch my lips with a coal. I'm not afraid of the fire. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, slander be burned away from you, along with all malice, says St. Paul. When you're fireborn, you can get about the business of humility, forgiveness, tender compassion, because the fire in you has already burned away everything you've tried to protect. Fire doesn't burn by itself. It needs fuel. Andrew Murray says, true humility begins and finds its strength in the knowledge that it is God who works all in all, and that our place is to yield to him in perfect resignation and dependence, in full consent to be and do nothing of ourselves. It's not the temple that's anything, but it's the God who dwells in it that sets it aflame. Living as a clean lick of eternal flame in the fire between the worlds, this is the key to re-enchantment. And don't we need re-enchantment right now? So it's back to the fire with you, artist. Come back from the iron world of the mundane, of the cooled ember, of fear and shame, of the past. Come back from the copper world of debasement and deconstruction and the scorched shell of who you thought you had to be. Yes, it will cost you, but also, yes, it's where your creativity will kindle and flourish. You will no longer grieve not fitting, feeling homeless and odd and awkward. You will no longer make apologies or excuses for your fire, but simply live in it, channel it, welcome others to stand in that living flame of love with you. Thanks for joining me for this week's Vesperisms. If you found value in this episode, would you please leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, like and subscribe on YouTube, all the things. And please share this episode. We have got to share the artistic worldview to more people, don't we? The time is now. You can follow me on Instagram at Vesperisms, sign up for my newsletter at vesperillustration.com, and you can buy my books at the bookseller of your choice, and please try to order from your local independent bookstore first. They would love to have your order. And when you've read my books, would you please leave me a great review on Amazon? That helps authors like me immensely. Music for Vesperisms is provided by Ben and Vesper. That's my band. You can find us on Spotify. Listen, friend and fellow artist, your voice is important. Your contribution matters more than ever. And just remember, work isn't everything, but everything is the work. See you next time.